The first light of dawn spills over the jagged rooftops of a medieval town. The sky is the color of ash, and a cold mist clings to the crooked alleyways like a shroud. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, but here in the heart of the city, the sound is swallowed by the low hum of life awakening. A cart creaks down the main road, its wooden wheels splintering on the cobblestones. A butcher sharpens his cleaver, the sound of steel on steel ringing like a warning. A barefoot boy chases a stray dog, while the baker shovels bread into the oven, the smell of rising dough fighting against the stronger stench of rotting refuse in the gutters. We are far from the shining image of chivalry painted in history books. There are no gallant knights here, no feasts of roasted swan. Behind every towering cathedral and fortified castle, there is another side of the Middle Ages, a hidden one, festering in the shadows. A side built on the backs of men and women whose names were never written down, whose work was never celebrated. And that is where we will go. The clang of a distant church bell marks the beginning of another day, summoning merchants, craftsmen, and laborers to their posts. But not all jobs are created equal. Some are honored, others are tolerated, and a few, the ones we are about to meet, are endured only by those desperate enough to trade their health, dignity, and even their lives for a handful of coins. We will walk with them. We will descend into the filth with the Gong farmer, who works in darkness among the human waste of an entire city. We will wade through leech-filled swamps with the leech collector, bleeding for every coin they earn. We will stand on the execution platform with the hangman, feeling the weight of 100 eyes and 100 silent curses. We will smell the rot in the mass graves of the plague buriers, feel the ammonia sting of the fuller's vats, hear the scratching in the shadows as the rat catcher risks his skin for the sake of others. They are the unspoken lifeblood of the Middle Ages. Without them, the streets would drown in filth, disease would claim every home, and the noble courts would have no one to enforce their will. But in their time, these people were often shunned, spat upon, and treated as if their work, the very work that kept society alive, made them less than human. The medieval world was a harsh and unyielding place. The air was thick with smoke from hearth fires, but behind the scent of burning oak was the odor of human life in all its raw, unwashed truth. To live here meant enduring discomfort as a constant companion, the chill of winter seeping through wooden walls, the itch of lice beneath your clothes, the taste of stale bread, the sound of coughing in every household. And for the poorest, it meant doing whatever it took to survive. In the chronicles of kings and battles, these people rarely appear. Yet without them, the cities would crumble, the markets would rot, and the castles would stand surrounded by pestilence. So step carefully. The cobblestones are slick from last night's rain, and the gutters are swollen with runoff, not just from the sky, but from the waste of the houses above. You'll want to hold your breath, because our journey begins in the most feared, most despised corner of this medieval city. Tonight, when all decent folk are asleep, a man will climb down into the dark, armed with nothing but a wooden shovel, a hemp rope, and the resolve to work where no one else dares. They call him the Gong farmer. The Gong farmer, keeper of the filth. Night has fallen. The streets are quiet, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog or the rattle of shutters in the wind. The townsfolk are asleep, tucked under coarse wool blankets, dreaming, or perhaps trying not to dream of the day ahead. But for one man, the work is only just beginning. He moves like a shadow, a burlap hood pulled over his head, a lantern swinging from his hand. The light barely cuts through the darkness, glinting off puddles in the cobblestones. The smell hits you before the sight does, a thick, choking stench that clings to the back of the throat. It is the smell of human waste fermented in the bowels of the city. His name is not worth remembering. Most don't bother to learn it. They call him Gong Farmer, a name as old as the filth he works in. His task is simple in theory, impossible in comfort: to clean the cesspits beneath privies, hauling away the human waste before it overflows into the streets. The cesspit lies beneath a wooden hatch in the back corner of a yard. The owner paid him in advance, always in advance, because no Gong Farmer would risk working for someone who might forget payment afterwards. Few people are willing to stand face to face with the man who handles the city's filth, let alone owe him money. With a grunt, he lifts the hatch. The lantern light reveals a dark, glistening pit below, the surface broken with bubbles that release a stench so foul you instinctively turn your head. The Gong Farmer doesn't flinch. He has long since stopped noticing the smell, or so he tells himself. In truth, he smells it always, even in his sleep. He ties a rope around his waist, hands it to his apprentice, a boy of no more than 13, already condemned to a life in darkness, and begins his descent. His boots sink into the sludge with a wet sound. The walls are slick with decades of filth, and the air is heavy with the sharp bite of ammonia. He works fast, shoveling the thick, tar-like matter into a bucket, hauling it up to the boy above. There is danger here. A single deep breath could knock a man unconscious. More than one Gong Farmer has slipped beneath the surface and never come up again, smothered by the very substance he was paid to remove. That is why they work at night. The cool air slows the fermentation, makes it just barely survivable. Every bucket is carried to the edge of town, where the waste will be dumped into trenches or sold to farmers as fertilizer. Yes, sold. Human waste was valuable to those desperate to enrich the thin soil of their fields. In that sense, the Gong Farmer's work keeps crops alive as surely as rain or sunlight. But no one thanks him. By daylight, if he walks through the market, mothers pull their children away. Merchants refuse to let him touch their goods. Even if he bathes in lye soap, the smell seems to cling to him, an invisible mark of his profession. Still, he endures. The pay is better than that of many laborers, enough to keep his family fed through the harsh winters. He knows the truth others pretend to forget. Without him, the city would drown in its own filth. The last bucket is hauled up. His back aches, his hands are raw, and his boots are coated in a grime that no scrubbing will remove. As the first light of dawn creeps over the rooftops, he pulls his hood tighter and disappears down a side alley, unseen, unthanked, and already forgotten. By the time the townsfolk wake, the cesspit will be empty, the streets will be cleaner, though they will not think of why, and the Gong Farmer will be sleeping, waiting for the next night when the darkness once again becomes his domain. But not all medieval filth came from the streets. Some came from the swamps, where people waded footless through the water, offering their blood to tiny creatures in exchange for coin. Next, we follow the trail to the Leech collectors and the price they paid in blood.
The Leech collector, bleeding for a living. The air is damp and heavy with the smell of mud and stagnant water. Morning fog curls above the marsh, turning the landscape into a gray, endless blur. Somewhere, a heron cries, its voice sharp against the stillness. And then, a splash. A woman steps into the water, barefoot, her dress hitched high around her knees. She carries no tools, no net, only a small wooden pail strapped to her hip. The chill of the bog seeps instantly into her bones, but she wades on without hesitation. This is her workplace. She is a leech collector, a profession older than the Middle Ages, but just as dangerous in this time. Her task is simple in description, brutal in execution: to let leeches attach to her bare skin, then peel them off and collect them for sale to apothecaries and physicians. The medieval world is ruled by humors, the belief that health depends on balancing the body's fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And to balance them, doctors often turn to bloodletting. Leeches are their tool of choice, prized for their ability to draw blood in a slow, controlled manner. That is why this woman is here, waist-deep in the bog, offering herself as bait. The first leech strikes without warning, a slip-cold coil wrapping itself around her ankle, then another, and another. Soon they cling to her calves, thighs, even the tender skin behind her knees. She waits until they are engorged, their bodies swelling and darkening with her blood, before plucking them off and dropping them into the pail. Each one writhes and twists in the shallow water, searching for another host. The bites sting, but worse than the pain is the itch that comes later, and the risk of infection. The bog water is thick with bacteria. A single wound could fester, turning red and hot, stealing her strength. Many leech collectors bear permanent scars, their skin pocked and rough from years of feeding the creatures they catch. And then there is the cold. Even in summer, the marsh drinks the heat from her body. In winter, the water can cut like a blade. Hypothermia is a constant threat, yet the work must continue. The demand for leeches never stops. The pay is meager. A day's work might buy a loaf of bread and a hunk of cheese, nothing more. But in a world where hunger is a sharper danger than disease, she returns to the marsh day after day. Some collectors bring their children, using smaller bodies to slip into deeper channels where the leeches hide. When her pail is full, she makes her way back to shore, legs trembling, blood trickling from the bites. She pours the leeches into a clay jar filled with damp moss, where they will survive until sold. The apothecary will handle them roughly, storing them in the dark until a physician calls for their use. And somewhere in a candlelit chamber, a patient will grimace as a wriggling black shape is pressed against their skin, never knowing, never caring about the woman who stood in the cold for hours so that their treatment could begin. Her work ends with the setting sun, but unlike the Gong farmer, she cannot hide her trade. The marks on her legs are permanent, a silent advertisement of her profession. People glance at them and look away quickly, as if her wounds are contagious. Tomorrow she will return to the marsh, and the marsh will take its price in blood once more. But not all medieval professions dealt in the quiet draining of life. Some took it in an instant, in front of a crowd that demanded both justice and spectacle. The executioner, death as a profession. The square is already filling when the sun rises over the rooftops. Merchants have paused their trade. Children sit on their fathers' shoulders, and the church bell tolls a slow, heavy rhythm that echoes between the stone walls. The scaffold stands at the center, stark against the pale sky. On it, a block of oak worn smooth by the weight of many heads. The executioner waits in the shadow of the platform. His face is partly hidden beneath a leather hood, not to frighten the crowd, though it does, but to shield himself from recognition in the streets. Those who know his face tend to cross themselves or step aside when he passes. It is not hatred, exactly. It is something colder, the understanding that his hands deliver death. His profession is ancient, sanctioned by kings and lords, and yet it is a lonely calling. No guild will take him. No tavern will gladly serve him. His children, if he has any, will inherit the stain of his work. And still, the city needs him. The condemned man is led forward, shackles clinking with each step. The crowd murmurs, hungry for the moment of finality. Some come for justice, others for the spectacle. In the medieval mind, execution is not just punishment, it is theater, a warning carved into the memory of everyone who watches. The executioner's tools are simple: the headsman's axe for beheadings, the rope for hangings, the wheel for breaking bones, the stake for burning. He knows them all, and each demands its own grim skill. One clean stroke is mercy, 2 is incompetence, 3 is unforgivable. He steps forward now, measuring the man's height, his posture. The condemned man kneels at the block. A final prayer is whispered, or perhaps a curse. The executioner has heard both. He lifts the axe. The weight is familiar, the balance perfect. He inhales once, holds it, and swings. The crowd gasps, some in horror, others in satisfaction. The head falls, the body slumps. The executioner steps back, wipes the blade, and signals for the remains to be taken away. His work is finished for today, but the echo of the blow will follow him. He is paid well, sometimes in coin, sometimes in goods or privileges. Yet the money does not wash away the isolation. He shops in the market when it is nearly empty. He drinks alone. When illness sweeps through the city, people whisper that he is cursed, that death clings to him. And perhaps it does. He has seen more endings than any priest, more terror than any soldier. But unlike the soldier, he cannot claim the heat of battle as his excuse. Every death he delivers is calm, deliberate, public. Still, there is a strange sort of respect buried under the fear. His blade is steady. His hangman's knot never slips. The condemned meet their end quickly in his hands, and in this brutal age, that counts for something. Yet in times of plague, the executioner's work is not the most feared. There is another profession that walks even closer to death, one that does not take life by order of the crown, but touches the dead when no one else dares.
The plague barrier, touching the untouchable. The bell rings again, not the sharp, bright call of Sunday Mass, but the slow, hollow toll that means only one thing: death. It echoes down the empty streets, rolling through shuttered windows and locked doors. No one comes to see who has died. In this season, everyone already knows. The plague has returned. The air itself feels heavy, thick with the smell of rot and sickness. Curtains hang limp in windows, unmoving, hiding faces that dare not look outside. There is no laughter in the alleys, no market chatter in the square. Only the sound of boots on cobblestones, carrying a burden no one else will bear. Two men turn the corner, pushing a rough wooden cart. They wear no armor, no uniform, only wool tunics and cloths tied over their mouths. The cart is lined with straw, though it does little to disguise the shapes that lie upon it. Some are wrapped in linen, others not at all. Their skin is pale, waxen, marked with the dark swellings of the plague. These are the plague barriers, men who walk into the rooms everyone else avoids, who carry the dead through streets that watch in silence. They are not physicians. They do not heal. Their work begins only when healing has failed. Each morning they follow the sound of the bell to the next house marked with a black cross. They step over the threshold, careful not to touch anything but the body they've come for. Sometimes the dead are light as bundles of sticks, their strength long since gone. Other times they are heavy, stiff with rigor, their eyes still open. The buriers do not close the eyes. They have learned not to look too long into the faces of the dead. The journey to the burial ground is slow. The city gates open for them without question. No guard wants to delay the passing of the plague cart. Beyond the walls, a wide pit yawns in the earth. This is no graveyard with headstones and prayers. This is a trench for the countless who will not be remembered by name. The buriers tip the cart. The bodies slide down into the pit, landing on others already there. There is no ceremony, no farewell. Only a sprinkling of quicklime to slow the smell, then another layer of earth. The pay is barely enough to live on, but in a time when work is scarce and hunger is certain, it is still work. Few men are desperate enough to take it. Those who do know they walk with death in more ways than one. The disease does not care for courage or necessity. It claims the buriers as easily as the rest. At night, they return to their quarters on the edge of town, far from the homes of others. No one visits. Even the tavern refuses their coin for fear of infection. They eat in silence, knowing tomorrow will bring another bell, another cart, another trench. The city fears the plague, but it also fears the men who deal with it.
To touch the dead is to be marked as untouchable among the living. And yet, without them, the streets would be piled with corpses, and the living would have no space left to breathe. But not all foul work in the Middle Ages was about death. Some jobs reeked of life, a stench so strong it could make the eyes water, and yet were essential to the very clothes on a man's back. The fuller, drowning in urine. The workshop sits at the far edge of town, downwind from the market. Even here, where people are accustomed to the smells of dung-filled streets and fishmonger stalls, the stench from the fuller's yard is enough to make passerbys quicken their step. A row of great wooden vats stands in the open air, each filled with a pale, frothy liquid that steams in the morning chill. It is not soap. It is not water. It is human urine, collected daily from chamber pots all over the city, delivered here in sloshing barrels by boys who are paid a few coins for their trouble. The fuller stands beside the vats, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, his feet bare. The work is simple in design, but brutal in practice. To clean newly woven wool by stopping it in a mixture of water and urine, sometimes with added clay, until the grease and impurities are gone. Only then can the cloth be dyed, cut, and sewn into garments. He climbs into the vat. The liquid is warm, not from any kindness of nature, but because it has been fermenting. The smell hits him like a blow, sharp with ammonia, strong enough to make the eyes water. Within moments, the fumes sting his throat, but there is no time to hesitate. He begins to tread, lifting and pressing the cloth beneath his feet in a steady rhythm. Hours pass like this. The wool grows softer, tighter in its weave, but the fuller's skin begins to burn. The ammonia strips away oils from the flesh as easily as it strips grease from the cloth. His feet will crack by evening, and the skin between his toes will be raw. The pay is modest, better than a field hand, worse than a skilled craftsman. But the work is constant. Every bolt of cloth in the town passes through vats like these. Without fullers, the wool trade, the lifeblood of medieval commerce, would falter. Still, no one boasts of being a fuller. The smell clings no matter how much he bathes, and in the tavern, men shift away from his bench. Women wrinkle their noses. Children whisper. The fuller learns to ignore it. When the day's treading is done, the cloth is rinsed in cold water, wrung out, and hung in long lines to dry in the open air. It will be warm on someone's back before the season turns. Maybe a merchant's cloak, maybe a knight's tunic. No one will think about the man who stood in a vat of waste to make it soft. For him, there is no pride in the finished garment, only aching legs, cracked skin, and the knowledge that tomorrow he will climb into the vat again. But even in the stinking yard of the fuller, there are worse places to work. In the narrow, rat-infested alleys of the medieval city, another man prowls with stick and sack, risking disease for the promise of coin. His prey carries death in its blood and teeth, but without him, the city would be overrun.
The rat catcher, hunting shadows. The alley is narrow, its walls leaning toward each other as if conspiring to block out the sun. Rotting cabbage leaves lie in the gutter, slick with rainwater. Somewhere beneath the refuse, something moves, quick, unseen. A faint scratching sound, a flicker of movement in the corner of the eye. The rat catcher stops in his tracks. He knows that sound better than anyone. He carries a simple kit, a burlap sack slung over his shoulder, a sturdy wooden stick worn smooth from use, and sometimes a small cage baited with crumbs. His eyes are always moving, scanning the ground, the shadows, the spaces between barrels and crates. Rats are more than a nuisance here. In a medieval city, they are harbingers of hunger, ruin, and death. They devour grain in storage, chew through sacks of flour, and spread disease with every bite and scratch. When plague comes, and plague always comes, rats are whispered about as its silent messengers. Catching them is dangerous work. A cornered rat will bite, and its teeth are sharp enough to slice through skin in an instant. The wound will fester if not cleaned, and infection can kill as surely as any sword. Worse still, the fleas that cling to a rat's fur can carry sickness into the catcher's own blood. But the city needs him. In the marketplaces, bakers and butchers hire him to keep their storerooms clean. In noble households, he is called through side doors, his presence kept discreet. No lord wants guests to know his halls are plagued by vermin. The work begins with silence. He crouches low, his breath slow, his stick raised. A rustle. Then a blur of fur and tail. The stick comes down fast, pinning the rat before it can vanish into the wall's cracks. In one swift motion, he scoops it into the sack. Inside, the burlap writhes. Some rat catchers kill their quarry on the spot. Others keep them alive for the bounty, dumping the contents of their sack into a waiting barrel for proof of the day's work. The smell of the sack is foul, the sound worse. Claws scratching, teeth gnawing, bodies writhing against each other in the dark. At night, when his rounds are done, the rat catcher washes his hands and arms in lye soap, scrubbing until his skin is raw. It never feels like enough. He knows too well what a rat's bite can do. Some nights when fever takes hold, he wakes in the dark certain that something is crawling beneath his skin. People cross the street when they see him coming, not because of the smell, though it lingers, but because his work is a reminder of what lurks just beyond the light. He is the man who sees the city's infestation, who walks into the spaces others pretend do not exist. It is thankless work, and often solitary. Yet without him, the grain stores would empty, the markets would close, and the very bread on a man's table would be gnawed away before it reached his plate. But his is not the final shadow in our journey. There is still one more step to take. Back from the alleys and markets, away from the filth and vermin, into the heart of the medieval truth, that behind the glory and grandeur of this age, there were always hands covered in blood, dirt, or worse. Closing reflections. Shadows behind the glory. The sun sets slowly over the medieval town, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the cobblestones. The streets grow quiet once more, and the bustle of the day fades into memory. But beneath the surface of this world of kings and castles, knights and nobles, lies a truth often forgotten. The glory of the Middle Ages was built on the backs of those who lived and labored in darkness. These were not the heroes sung in ballads or painted on tapestries. They were the Gong farmers who crawled into cesspits to clear away the city's waste, the Leech collectors who bled in the bogs so others might survive, the executioners who carried out justice but carried a heavier burden of isolation, the plague buriers who touched the dead when no one else dared, the fullers who stood in vats of urine to clean the cloth that clothed a kingdom, and the rat catchers who hunted the shadows to keep plague and hunger at bay. Their stories are harsh and often cruel, yet their lives were threaded with a quiet resilience. They endured the unbearable, faced the reviled, and accepted the unseen, all to keep the world turning. Without their labor, the streets would have drowned in filth, disease would have consumed the living, and the halls of power would have fallen into ruin. History remembers the crowns and the conquests, the battles won and the thrones claimed. But it is these unseen hands, stained and scarred, that held the fragile tapestry of medieval life together.
So next time you think of the Middle Ages, look beyond the castles and the kings. Remember the shadows, the people who did the work no one else wanted. Their lives were the true backbone of an age both brutal and magnificent. In the dirt, in the dark, in the forgotten corners, they lived. They survived. They made history.